let's talk about the budget. It's coming up in a week on Wednesday, and we've heard so many rumours about what's in, what's not in the budget. Is there a mansion tax? The income tax going to go up? Apparently not. A milkshake tax is later today, but we are going to also see some stealth taxes in terms of your income tax ban. Well, let's talk about it all with Independent Economist Julian Jessop. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Right, first of all, let's talk about the income tax. There was a talk that there was going to be an income tax rise of 2 pence in the pound, but also a national insurance cut for 2 pence in the pound. So the average worker wouldn't actually see difference, but it would hit pensioners, would hold people. We're now told that's not happening. Was it ever seriously on the cards?
Oh, I'm absolutely certain it was. I mean, the newspapers were widely briefed that this was a proposal that the Chancellor had submitted to the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility.
Yes, they didn't make it up.
No. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And all the signals a few weeks ago were that the Labour Party was preparing to break the manifesto commitments, and we had that so-called scene-setting speech from Rachel Reeves that was clearly designed to do that. So that plan was real and has been dropped. There's some attempt to explain this away in terms of some better forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility.
It's a load of nonsense.
That's what I would politely at this time in the morning call nonsense. Any good news would already have been factored into the forecast before the plan to raise income tax was included. So it was inevitably about the fears of the political fallout, and that was certainly the views of the markets on Friday. So there was a big jump in the cost of government borrowing, because markets don't like this uncertainty. They think the government isn't serious about raising tax, let alone cutting spending.
So this is the key thing. This is the markets, the gilt markets, the 10-year yield. Is that it? So basically, this is the sort of debt that the government sells, and people buy it, and then they agree to pay a certain rate of interest. And basically, the more unsure they are about our economy, the higher the interest rate.
Yes, I mean, there are a number of things. I mean, first of all, there's the pure uncertainty. So the government says one thing and then changes its mind. So there's a U-turn there that the markets don't like. But also, it might sound an odd thing to say, the markets actually quite like the idea of income tax going up because it's better than the alternatives. Income tax at least raises a reasonably certain amount of money. Whereas what we're likely to get instead is what's been described as a smorgasbord of smaller tax measures. I describe it as a dog's breakfast instead. So lots of itty-bitty tax increases. I mean, you mentioned the mansion tax, the milkshake tax and so on. It's highly uncertain how much money these will actually raise. And what's likely to happen also is, of course, in the days after the announcement, they will unravel as people like me go into the nitty-gritty detail and say the numbers don't add up.
But this is the interesting thing, isn't it? I can remember, I've covered so many budgets over the years, George Osborne and his pasty task and this budget and that budget. And normally they unravel in the hours and days afterwards when people go through this huge big book. They go through the numbers at the back. And often some of the biggest announcements aren't even announced on the floor of the Commons. They're just in the numbers, in the appendices afterwards. And people, the cleverer, folk like you go through the numbers and go, hold on a minute. This is a budget that's unravelling before it's even been announced and finalised. But surely the Chancellor at this point must know, because things have to be sent to be published, to be printed. The OBR, as you say, have to actually oversee it and agree to numbers. They must know by now exactly what's in it. So when we're told that there's going to be a mansion tax, so people who own a property, £2 million plus, that they're going to get taxed 1% of the value.
She could still be making decisions next weekend.
Right, okay, could be that late. Which again does show a lack of sort of thinking through. There isn't as you said, there isn't a plan. It's just my God, we've got no money. What do we do? Mad panic.
Well, one of the big problems here is that the budget this year is unusually late. And I think that could have been justified if they'd used the extra time to come up with a proper plan that they could explain to everybody. But of course, the opposite has happened. We're still, about a week and a half away from the budget, and there's clearly no overarching plan. And that's really damaging for the economy. So already in the last few months, there's been no growth at all. All the signs are that businesses have put hiring and investment on hold. Consumers have stopped spending. The housing market is frozen. So this has real costs when she does this. And as a former Treasury official myself, I find this really frustrating. We used to have this thing called budget purdah, where basically everybody just shut up ahead of the budget. This time we've had the opposite. We've had all sorts of rumours and leaks. I think I've counted.
It's budget diarrhea, for goodness sake.
Yeah, over 100 policy options, I think I've counted, have been floated, and some of them have been shot down since then. But it's very unclear what's going to be in the budget. And even when it's announced, it will be days, maybe weeks, before we really know what the implications are going to be.
And that's the thing. And also this itty-bitty, as opposed to when many of the, not just economists, but, the money markets are saying, look, if you're going to have to, deal with the actual budget and the balancing of the books, you need to do two things. One, widespread tax rises, so things like income tax or VAT, something that is spread across the whole economy and across everybody, and that's what they do in most other Western countries. That if you want to pay for your NHS and things like that, everyone at the bottom pays a lot more tax. But also spending cuts, and we know they couldn't even get through the most sort of cursory £5 billion in spending cuts on welfare. So the chances are them getting any welfare cuts through is negligible. But let's talk about the so-called stealth tax, and this is about the thresholds at which you start paying 20% tax, start paying 40% tax and the 45% tax, because a lot of people, it's quite complicated how these thresholds work, but we're looking at a huge number more people over the years, previously and coming up, who will end up paying much higher rates of tax, won't they?
Well, the first thing, I'll probably stop calling it a stealth tax, because it's a rather odd stealth tax. Everybody is talking about it. So, everybody will see loads of numbers on your programme and in the newspapers and elsewhere saying that as a result of this, you will be paying, £1,000 more than you would otherwise have done. So it's a very unsuccessful stealth tax. It's also one that, if Rachel Reeves does go ahead with it, she herself has described as a tax increase on working people. She discussed this option in the October budget last year and ruled it out, saying it would be a breach of their promises. So in a sense, it's just as much a breach of the manifesto commitments as raising the basic rate of income tax would.
That's quite extraordinary, isn't it? But an awful lot of people who, bearing in mind things like the 40% tax rate, that was supposed to be, that was for bank managers, rather than someone that worked on the till of a bank, isn't it? That's the thing. We're talking about nurses, teachers, police officers being pulled into that higher rate tax bracket where 40% tax taken on every extra pound they earn over about 50 grand. That, 50 grand, I know there are a lot of people earning a lot less than that. You'll say, well, I dream of earning that money. People on 50 grand are not feeling wealthy in large parts of the country.
And it's also, of course, at the lower end. You're right. Something like 10 million plus people will be paying the higher rate, the 40p rate. But also, we're talking about freezing the personal allowance, the very low level. At which
12.5 grand before you pay any tax at all.
Exactly. So a lot of what everybody would describe as working people, those, for example, on the minimum wage, will start paying income tax. Pensioners who are just on the state pension will start paying income tax. So
these are people who they've hit by inflation the worst, because most of the stuff that's gone up is actually the essentials, and they have to pay for the heating and the food, and then they've had a pay rise if they're lucky to allow for that inflation, and the load of that pay rise then pushes them into the tax bracket, so they don't get much of that pay rise, so they're still worse off.
Yeah, so stepping back a bit, you made a very good point about we should be cutting spending instead. And if I were the Chancellor, the first thing I would do, and potentially the only thing I would do, is cut spending, or at least make sure it grows less quickly.
Yeah, but then you're going to upset, all your Labour voters, all the public sector workers. That's the trouble. And everyone on welfare, it's not the party of working people anymore. It's the party of welfare. Julian Jessop, thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk to you, Independent Economist Julian Jessop.